October 5th, 2025, 3 a.m. The icy silence over western Ukraine was shattered as a rain of Russian cruise missiles and suicide drones tore across the night sky. Within minutes, explosions rocked Lviv, Yavoriv, and Novoyavorivsk. Schools, factories, and homes engulfed in flames. 8 civilians were dead, dozens wounded, and a maternity hospital lay in ruins. It was not a military strike. It was a message. Operation Winter Vengeance, targeting Ukraine's western cities and vital civilian lifelines near NATO's border. But by dawn, Ukraine's grief had turned into resolve. Inside underground command rooms, engineers, soldiers, and coders forged a new weapon from ingenuity: Operation Silent Thunder. A fleet of 370 low-cost drones built from plywood and plastic, programmed to strike deep into the Russian heartland. Now, as the engines hum and countdown begins, one question echoes across the front lines. Can Ukraine's swarm pierce Russia's impenetrable defenses, or will the skies over Moscow consume them in fire? October 5th, 2025, 3 a.m. The icy silence over western Ukraine is shattered as the first salvo of Russian cruise missiles rips through the night sky. Without warning, the explosions occur near the city of Lviv, just 80 kilometers from the border with NATO-held Poland. In just 5 minutes, more than 24 missiles and 18 suicide drones strike civilian and industrial infrastructure across Yavoriv, Drohobych, and Novoyavorivsk. At first, chaos ensues. Then sirens sound. Ukrainian air defenses spring into action. Buk M1 and NASAMS systems light up the sky, intercepting wave after wave. 17 missiles are fired, while 24 drones are disabled mid-air, with 8 still getting through. Within 30 minutes, 3 neighborhoods, 2 small factories, and a school had been hit. Windows shattered. Fires blazed into raging fires. Ambulances raced. The town resembled a map of ruins. 2 buildings burned to the ground. 2 schools structurally damaged. A small industrial area shut down. The death toll rose immediately. 8 civilians were confirmed dead. More than 25 were wounded, many with burns and shrapnel. A maternity hospital near Sambir had taken a direct hit. Nurses sobbed as they carried newborn babies into the streets amid the rubble. Dozens of families, now homeless, gathered near the train stations, their faces frozen in disbelief. This was not a military operation. It was a message. Russia launched Operation Winter Vengeance, targeting Ukraine's western strongholds and civilian lifelines less than 80 kilometers from NATO's eastern flank. Vital infrastructure was paralyzed. The town's main power supply was cut. Fuel depots were damaged. Local authorities reported an estimated 175,000 liters of diesel fuel had been burned or contaminated. Hospitals were running on generators. Shelters filled quickly. More than 2,400 people were displaced overnight. As dawn broke, the scale of the devastation became clear. Schools, factories, homes, all flattened in less than 20 minutes. The West watched. NATO remained silent. But in Kiev, something more dangerous than anger was taking shape: determination. By 6 a.m. on October 6, 2025, the Ukrainian capital was no longer mourning. It was calculating. The president's office had submitted an urgent formal appeal to the 30-member NATO Council that morning, a request that had been stamped, signed, and delivered. Condemn the airstrikes, authorize immediate aid, authorize Ukraine to impose restrictive measures to protect its people. The message was simple and public. Our towns have been brutally attacked. We call on our partners to stand with us. 3 formal requests were made around the same time: to the Secretary General, to the Council of Europe, to allied capitals. The clock on the wall ticked. The response was not what ministers in Kiev had hoped for. The usual phone calls, careful language, and a carefully crafted press release all fell short. For 72 hours, there was no decisive military support, no declaration of red lines. Diplomacy moved at the speed of paper. Buildings burned with the speed of primitive explosives. Inside the intelligence room, President Volodymyr Zelensky sat at the head of the table, surrounded by the country's best military strategists, intelligence officers, and UAV engineers. They prepared response options, not with missiles, but with innovation. A plan was activated under the code name Operation Silent Thunder. At its core were 370 low-cost suicide drones, each assembled from commercial parts, plastic composites, and 3D printed housings. Each cost just $1,800, less than a Russian soldier's monthly salary. But together, they form a $666,000 fleet, enough to cripple a superpower. The drones will fly in 6 squadrons, each programmed to fly at a different altitude and approach path. From 250 meters to just 12.5 meters above the ground, their trajectories form a web of digital chaos. Most are automated, but as they approach Russian airspace, 18 elite drone operators, programmers turned warriors, will take manual control. Ukraine's revenge will come not with force, but with chaos. And the first drone will take off in less than 36 hours. Time has begun to tick away. Could this audacious plan shatter Moscow's invincibility, or would it vanish against radar and flame? 8 a.m. The sky over western Russia was silent, quiet, but the silence was deceptive. In the 48 hours since Russia's attack on Lviv, 370 Ukrainian suicide drones had violated Russian airspace. They came from not one direction, but 6, with one purpose: to strike at the heart of Moscow. Inside Russia's state-of-the-art S-400 and S-500 command centers, radar operators stared at blank screens, in confusion. The Delta Formation, flying just 12.5 meters above the ground, was completely invisible. No signal was returned. No alarms were triggered. By 8:23 a.m., the first drones had reached Moscow's outer defense perimeter. Russian air defenses near Kaluga lit up. The alarm bells rang, a hasty shout of enemy. Without hesitation, the anti-aircraft batteries were activated. A hail of interceptor missiles roared into the sky. In the chaos, 125 drones flying at high altitude as decoys were shot down. Their fragments scattered across the Kaluga and Tver provinces. It looked like a victory, but it was just a bluff. The remaining 245 drones now scattered like smoke on the radar field. Some crashed close to the roofs. Others circled widely, clinging to riverbanks and power lines. By the time the Russian defense system was recalibrated, it was too late. The swarm of drones was already within Moscow's shield. 8:48 a.m. Chaos broke out. 85 UAVs that had hit the Echo Group exploded in the sky over Moscow City, Russia's leading financial district. Glass towers shattered. Fire engulfed the top 3 floors of a state-owned telecommunications headquarters. 4 people were killed instantly. Seconds later, 15 drones crashed into apartment blocks along Kutuzovsky Prospect, home to senior government officials. The sky turned orange. Sirens fell silent. Street cameras recorded scenes of panic. Parents clutching children. Elderly residents crawling out of the smoke. The worst happened next. 9:12 a.m. A direct hit the security dome near the Borovitskaya Tower, shaking the ancient walls. Security forces were mobilized. 17 people were confirmed dead. 57 were injured, many with third-degree burns. Moscow's power grid was shut down. Metro lines were paralyzed. The Air Defense Command lost contact for 6 crucial minutes, a long time in a siege. The sirens blared like wartime London. Russia's proud capital, once dubbed impregnable, was now burning. But this was no accident. It was a statement. No fortress is safe from the darkness. Ukraine didn't just cross a border. It punctured Russia's illusion of invincibility. And it did it for the price of a drone under $700,000, less than even the cost of buying a single Russian-caliber missile. Moscow wasn't just attacked, it was exposed. Keep watching, because the aftermath of this strike is more shocking than the attack itself. 3:15 p.m. As the last explosions died down, the Russian capital was engulfed in smoke and chaos. The Moscow skyline, once ablaze with light, was now ablaze with fire. Emergency sirens blared, but the city's power grid had been cut off. Firefighters raced through debris-strewn streets illuminated only by charred glass and twisted steel. In the first 20 minutes, more than 2,000 distress calls poured into Moscow's paralyzed command center. But communications were disrupted. Cell towers were knocked out, fiber optic cables severed, radio frequencies jammed by the system's own malfunctioning systems. What had started as a drone attack had escalated into a humanitarian crisis. At 3:32 a.m., the Kremlin's Crisis Council met in an underground room. The reports were grim. 17 civilians were confirmed dead, including 3 children. 57 people were seriously injured, many with third-degree burns. More than 200 families were displaced and their homes were burned to the ground. Structural damage was estimated at $2.1 billion, spread over 14 city blocks. Outside, the scene was haunting. People staggered through the rubble-strewn streets, their faces smeared with blood, their clothes torn, their eyes lifeless. An old woman clutched a charred doll, muttering a prayer. A man in a work uniform sat on a collapsed bus station bench, covered in ash, clutching a coworker who would never move again. By evening, 7 government facilities were down. Telecom networks, power stations, and transportation networks were disabled. Moscow's subway line 4 was buried under rubble, trapping hundreds underground. Black smoke billowed over the Moscow World Trade Center, now a scarred reminder of its fragility. Confusion reigned across Russian state media. Initial reports suggested a NATO cyber attack, others whispered sabotage. But one truth burned indisputably. Ukraine had struck at the heart of Russia, not with ballistic force, but with ingenuity and desperation. President Vladimir Putin addressed the nation, his tone cold and decisive. He pledged swift justice and labeled Ukraine a terrorist state. Yet even as his words echoed, questions lingered in every ministry. Why did a $20 billion defense system fail? How could a nation built on power be paralyzed by machines worth less than a car? The fire continued to rage, and beneath the smoke, Russia's illusion of invincibility crumbled to ashes. From October 6th to 8th, 2025, the world held its breath. As news of the drone attack on Moscow made global headlines, one question echoed through capitals, war rooms, and newsrooms. What would NATO do? For 2 days, the alliance said nothing. No condemnation of Russia's airstrike on Lviv. No support for Ukraine's retaliation against Moscow. No public statements. Inside Kiev, silence reigned. President Zelensky submitted 3 urgent communiques to the North Atlantic Council, requesting humanitarian aid, defensive weapons, and permission to expand operations eastward. Each was met with a pending review. Meanwhile, Ukraine braced for retaliation. Air raid sirens blared day and night. Civilians slept soundly in the subway. Generators roared in pitch-black hospitals. People were no longer asking for guarantees, just transparency. And then, on October 8th, 2025, 2:03 p.m., NATO blinked. A joint statement was issued. We condemn the attack on Lviv and express concern about the escalation of the conflict. A special session has been convened to assess security vulnerabilities in Eastern Europe. No mention of Moscow. No word on military assistance. But something had changed. By 6 p.m., the U.S. Department of Defense had quietly approved $600 million for Ukrainian unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs. Poland opened its airports to Ukrainian refueling planes. Lithuania and Estonia call for full consultations on Article 5. Behind closed doors, NATO leaders are not just debating Ukraine, they are confronting a new reality. Fortresses are falling, borders are blurring, wars are no longer fought solely by armies. In Brussels, a secret report is circulating among the senior command. Its summary is a single line. A $1,800 drone just revealed a $500 billion defense strategy. The consequences are enormous. Military analysts call it the birth of a new doctrine of warfare. Asymmetric swarming, low-cost, high-impact attacks designed to bypass traditional power structures. Ukraine didn't just attack Moscow, it rewrote the rules of modern warfare. And as Kyiv rebuilt, its leaders no longer waited for permission. They told the world outright, if allies don't protect the innocent will protect themselves. This message was more powerful than any missile, because behind the rubble of Moscow and Lviv lay a truth that every nation will soon have to face. You can spend billions of dollars building walls, but sometimes history comes through a window. In just 2 days, the world changed. Russia's brutal winter offensive ended in a cloud of smoke over Moscow. Ukraine, devastated and cornered, had proven that stamina, strategy, and will can defeat even the most advanced military machines. With nothing more than a few pieces of plywood, circuit boards, and a reason too painful to ignore, they breached the gates of one of the world's most fortified capitals. But this story is not just about Ukraine or Russia. It is about all nations that still cling to the illusion of security. It is about alliances that promise unity but falter when they are most needed. It is about lives lost, not for lack of strength, but for lack of action. NATO's silence, the panic in Moscow, the whispered prayers under the rubble in Lviv, all have become symbolic. A symbol of a world entering a new era, where enemies don't always wear uniforms, and war doesn't wait for declarations of war. For the people of Ukraine, the assault on Moscow wasn't a victory to celebrate. It was a necessity paid for in blood. For the people of Russia, it was a grim reminder that the empire they built on fear could be breached, even by hands they had fired. And for the rest of the world, it was a final warning. Wars are no longer fought only on battlefields. They start in labs, basements, and quiet nights. Wars are fought not just between soldiers, but also between engineers, programmers, and citizens with nothing left to lose. What happened in October 2025 will be studied for decades. Not because of the weapons used, but because of the will behind them. The battlefield has changed. The question is, who is ready? If you found this analysis insightful and want to support more in-depth breakdowns like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And hit the bell icon, so you never miss the next unfolding conflict.